Okay, I want to continue on from where we left the last video with we did some work on the needle jet on the 276 to increase flow for the methanol nitro. And we just want to emphasize that we are referring to gravity fed motorcycles running alcohol, methanol and nitro. You guys running gasoline don't really need to flow, and the rest of you guys with pumps, etc. Probably don't need to worry too much about this, but let's just on the gravity side, which we do. And if you were my dad, he'd say gravity fed's where it's at. Cheating if you're using a pump. So anyway, so what we've done is we've fixed the needle, so we've got the fuel there, but getting the fuel to the carburetor. So got the 276 here, and once again, it's all about fuel flow. And I'm just gonna pull the banjo off the bottom of the main jet and the emulsion tube. And you can even see here, Dad's pretty sneaky. He's always chasing, making sure we can get that fuel. Because this carby ran on the blown 100, you can see here, Dad's even machined down, he's machined the hex off the emulsion tube, because he knows when this banjo sits here, half of it takes that area. So whether it's needed or not, it's just another one of those little 1%ers that might guarantee that you're in the mile and you got 300 meters to go, your fuel's not, you're not losing fuel. So a little trick there, just have a look at fuel flow, and also the banjo. I think he's done a little bit of work on the banjo here. Just make sure your fittings are the right size. Now the banjo bolt here, another little thing I can see he's done, we try to do, he's opened up the hole in the banjo. It was probably a half that size, and of course doubling the size increases the volume tenfold. So a couple of little tricks there on the bottom of the 276 to get just to cover us really is machining the hex off that emulsion tube and opening up that banjo bolt. If you want to be real particular and you're marginal on fuel, you can even get it that when you do the bolt up with the banjo, that the banjo spigot is in line with that hole. If the banjo is operating well, sufficiently, it shouldn't need that, but as another little guide, that is something you can do. And how to adjust that is the thickness of your washers to make sure when that does up, it's in the right spot of tightness. So that's pretty much the 276. Someone did ask why we run the 276 and not a AMEL TT or GP. They don't make little GPs and TTs anymore. They stopped making them many years ago. Hard to come by, and because we're AMEL's been supported our team now for a few years, they supply us the carbs and we try to run what they sell. So we run the 276, which you can get at AMEL, and on the blown bike we run a TT, only because we couldn't get a GP small enough. The blown bike runs a slightly bigger carburetor. This one I think is a 1 1/16, so yeah, no GPs or TTs that small. Someone also did ask what bowl we run. On both bikes, although the blown bike runs 2 bowls, this is the bowl we run. It's a remote bowl, 504 from AMEL. Bottom fill, used a lot in, you'll see all the drag bikes in the 70s, Sunny Route, Boris Murray and Dad, of course, ran these 504 remote bowls. Float chamber is a normal carburetor, but what we do is instead of when we want to raise or lower the float, this bowl sits in this cradle here, and you can see it's got an adjustment here. We raise the whole bowl up and down, so no really touching the float. I think the one on the blown bike's got a bolt here, and Dad adjusts it with washers, so that's how we do that. Now the advantage of the bottom fill bowl over the top fill is our fuel tanks are probably only this high above our bowl. So if we got 4 inches of gap here, we've got another 3 inches here because it's bottom fill, so we gain that extra head pressure. So just all these little things can catch you out running fuel, I guess, especially when you go from gasoline. The next thing is fuel flow on the bike. We do fuel flow tests every so often when we make a change. So we will fill the tanks up and we'll flow the fuel lines, measure every 250 mil the time it takes for that fuel to get into the container. That way when you're in the mile what part of your tanks you're on and how much head pressure you got, and make sure you're still getting enough fuel flow. Be nothing worse than being in the last quarter mile and having that fuel flow drop away and grenade it. So something to be think about. Opening up those, all fittings and lines being big enough. On fittings, we have bought a few fittings over the years from reputable companies that are supposed to be a certain size, and internally they're not. So a fuel flow check will catch this up. When we get to Gairdner and to Bonneville, we'll flow the fuel system, because we've had times in transit that the bowls vibrated, stuck, or something's weird's happened in transit, something's changed. So we'll do a fuel flow, and better to catch it in the pits or in the garage than in the mile, because it's going to destroy it. Now you can flow the bowl as well. To flow the bowl, these remote bowls, you either hook it up as normal. You have to have the bowl upside down. Take the top off it. Have to work out a way to hold the float down to open it up. So you'd flow it, we'd wire it up, we'd hook it on, and we'd flow it into a container and see what that flows. So this is a huge fitting here. This is like off a Norton's and etc. Ran this bowl. So for the 50, we've got plenty of fuel flow. Another thing we do on the dyno, is we run a side hose. So here it is here. This hose goes between my bowl and the carburetor. And that gives me not only my height of my carby height, float height. During a pull, we'll watch this height and make sure it's not pulling down, and make sure that we've got plenty of fuel. This has saved us a couple of times with the 100 on the dyno. We've found issues when we went from we had an issue in 16 and 17 in Bonneville. We ran the 111 over there and set the record. Then we went back to run 114. And it went like a rocket. It was a great day, beauty. In impound thing, and we're going to come back in the morning. We're going to set the 114, back it up. Got into the mile, halfway through the mile, and it pushed the crank out the bottom. What we didn't know at the time, because we hadn't been to the dyno that year for whatever reason, we were draining the bowl. And if we would have been to the dyno, we would have seen that we were draining the bowl. So all of 17, we drained the bowl. Then 18 went to Gairdner, and we had issues with draining the bowl again. It wasn't until 19, and what you do is you're draining the bowl and you don't know, so what you do, you keep richening the jet up, but all you're doing by richening the jet up is you're draining the bowl quicker. So you're sort of going forward, but you're not going forward, you're going in the wrong direction. So Gairdner 19, when Dad rode the bike, we put a second bowl on the bike, which fed the power jets and by itself, so it was two bowls, and he could take fuel out of the bike then, and it went faster, didn't drain, didn't hurt. So for a couple of years there, because we didn't go to the dyno for whatever reason, or we went to the dyno and we had problems and we didn't get to this stage of the day on the dyno, we didn't know that problem, so we could have caught that a year or two earlier. But that's the way your program goes at time. On the blown bike, we run 2 power jets, and I've just ordered a power jet for the 50, just to give it, when we've got the nitro in it, just to give that extra fuel up top and give it every chance to live. Oh, one last thing we're talking before we sign off on the whole fuel system is that people talk about horsepower, and we know the blown 100 makes 54 horsepower, 9 horsepower per cube, which is a pretty amazing figure. And the 50's making 19.3, so probably 24 at the crank. So they're both right up there. We can make more, but as a few guys will find out there, you can make more, but to go the mile and run those 3 miles flat out, pedal to the metal, we run huge amounts of fuel. So don't be afraid. Don't think lean is mean on the salt. Lean ain't mean on the salt. You got to better survive. I think the 50's in the mile for, it's flat out for over a minute. So there's not many vehicles in the world that you're flat out for a minute, full noise at 14,000 RPM. So we run excess fuel, especially with the methanol, to try to keep it cool and keep it under control. So that's another thing there. A lot of people try to rotate the earth on day one at Speed Week, whether it's at Gairdner or Bonneville. You still want to be running Wednesday, Thursday, Friday when the crowds are gone. You want to have it in one piece then, and be winding the wick up then. So start fat, and you can always come back. Don't worry about lean and mean. And it's probably the same on dyno pulls. I've seen a lot of dyno pulls for guys. They go over horsepower, they go to Bonneville, and they go zip, and that's the dyno pulls. Like, oh, okay. Do long pulls. Pull it for a minute, see how it lives then. See, watch it then. Watch how the temperature affects it, etc. So lots of fuel, start fat, long pulls. See you at the end of the mile. Cheers.